At what point did you realize that you were just being used? When I said that I can't afford to keep footing the bill every time we go out, and her response was maybe you should work harder. There comes a point in many friendships where you realize that if the tables were turned, the other person probably would not do nearly as much for you as you're doing for them. This hit me really hard. Frick, I'm always the first person to raise my hand when a friend is moving. The last time I moved my wife and I did it alone because everyone was busy. They stopped inviting me out and texting me when I told them I didn't want them to store their weed at my place anymore. So much for best friends. When she complained to me, I wish someone would just buy me a car so I don't have to drive around that $500 beater. I had bought her the $500 beater. You can buy me the $500 beater, as long as it runs vaguely well. I'll love you. Walking like 9 miles one way for grocery shopping while it's freezing outside is not fun. My friends, married, would always want to just hang out with us 3 alone, never inviting me to hang out with their other friends. They would ask me to watch their dogs all the time while they were out of town with said friend group because the dogs just love you only. I think I fully realized it when all the friend pictures in their house included none of me. I was with my ex-fiance for 3 years. There were a lot of major red flags that I was being used during the last 5 months of our relationship. His company lost a lot of jobs, barely had any work for their employees to do, maybe worked a couple hours once or twice a week. All his co-workers went and found side work together to stay afloat. He didn't join them. He did stop paying his share of the bills and instead used that money to go out drinking all day or buying some new unnecessary part for his truck. Every time I asked if he could chip in even just a tiny bit for bills he said he couldn't. Then I'd find a receipt for a $100 bar tab carelessly left on the counter. It was obvious he had checked out and just wanted to sit around, do whatever he wanted and not work. The defining moment was while we were driving home after hanging out with friends. Someone jokingly asked when we were planning to get married. We had been engaged for 2 years. I flat out asked him, when are we getting married? When are we going to start a family? We talked excitedly about it so much after he proposed. You know, I don't really want to get married. I think we're fine how we are. And I don't even know if I want kids. Yep, I'm being used. He's just dragging me along. He doesn't love me anymore or was never in love with me to begin with. But I'm definitely just the person who pays his bills. I had a suspicion he was cheating again but no evidence. It was my birthday and I asked if he wanted to go to dinner. Obviously I would be paying. Nope. He didn't feel like it. He didn't get me a gift. I didn't want anything but I hoped for some small gesture. A handwritten note, something. I bought myself a small cake. You want to hang out and eat cake with me? Nope. Too busy watching TV. A week later I told him I was done. That he could take a couple days, but he needed to pack up and go back to his dad's house. Suddenly he was crying. Suddenly he was paying attention to me. I'll marry you, we can start trying for a baby tomorrow. With what job? What money? You don't even care to be anywhere near me. You ignored me on my birthday. He packed up and left the next day. I found out a couple weeks later he was seeing another girl behind my back and that she was pregnant. Back in high school, I was one of the first to have my license and a car. I noticed that my friends wanted to hang out with me a lot less when they got their own cars' licenses. Yeah, not very proud that I didn't see the writing on the wall. They say it was just a coincidence that we fell through at a time, but I think it's pretty obvious. This is very common in high school. Everyone used each other for lifts. We had been friends since high school. About 10 years or so later, another friend of mine went real talk on me and asked when the last time I was with Katie without her needing a ride, or asking to borrow something, etc, etc. I chew on that for a few months, and realized she really does only call when she needs a ride, money, advice, or a sitter. She was never really around when I needed something, which was rare, or if I just had a crappy day and needed to vent. She would call me right back. Never. I started distancing myself from her gradually, and once I started turning down her requests, weeks would go by before I'd hear from her. One night, after several weeks of no communication other than an occasional comment or like on FB, she called to ask if I could give her a clean urine sample for her new big job at Arby's. End friendship. 10 years up in smoke. The friend that went real talk on you is a keeper. Hard to find honest people who will tell you like it is. Girl I had considered my best friend through high school and college whined for weeks about how she had nowhere to go for Thanksgiving. Kicked out by her fundy parents at 18, so I invited her to dinner with my family. She didn't show up, so I called to see what happened. Turns out she did have places to go for the holiday. 7 different houses, including her parents, and she didn't think she could fit us, that is, the person she'd called her best friend for nearly a decade, into her plans. When I asked if she had been planning on calling me at any point to tell me she couldn't come, she said no. Just no. Not even a half-assed apology. I hung up on her and spent the rest of the night analyzing my friendship with her. I realized that despite all I did, giving her rides, storing her stuff, attending her life events where I was promptly forgotten, and spending a ridiculous amount of time on the phone helping her work through her drama of parents' boys' money school, including helping her plan a wedding to a man I later learned wasn't even legally divorced from his first wife, she didn't reciprocate at all. When I talked to her about my problems, she made a show of listening before changing the subjects to her problems, which would go on for hours. We had to do activities she wanted or eat at places she liked. We had to work around her schedule, but there was always a good chance that she would blow me off without even telling me. I promptly disappeared from her life. I don't even think she noticed. Nearly all of my girlfriend's friends are like this to her. She still doesn't understand why I don't like any of them even when I tell her that is the reason. That they don't respect her at all. My girlfriend was in a bad accident, and a female friend of mine was helpful with helping me deal with everything going on. A week after the accident my GF died. My friend started trying to get closer to me. Due to the state I was in, depressed, lonely, just wanting to feel happy again, my judgment was skewed and we started hanging out a lot. A little over a month later she sends me a text stating that we can't see each other anymore. Turned out she was using me to make her crush jealous. Really fricked me up for a while. I never fully coped with the passing of my girlfriend because of it all. Jesus. Some people really have no decency. I'm sorry for your loss. Hope things have gotten better for you. When I noticed that Daisy, the goat down the road, was only happy to see me if I was walking by with food. If I had nothing to eat, she wouldn't give me the time of day. She's a people user. Bastard. When he would constantly be about money even though he wouldn't hold down a job for more than a couple months at a time. I would pay for dinners and anything else for dates because he said he didn't have the money, even though he had champagne taste. I don't expect gifts but he couldn't even take me out or get me something small for my birthday or our anniversary, but then ended up buying himself a $500 bike because it was cool. Just recently got rid of a friend like this, constantly complaining about being poor and living with his mom with a girlfriend and 2 kids. He literally would ghost me and be off the grid for months. When his tax return came around and he actually had money, he'd want to hang out to brag about all the cool stuff he had, then be poor 2 weeks later. When she called me at 2 in the morning to ask me why I liked her and when I asked why she wanted to know, she basically told me it was because she wanted a quick ego boost. Says in a sarcastic, pee off, and alone voice. Imagine if they had an app for that. When I pleaded with my father to pay me like a normal employee so I could get TI when I went to school, he said no, it was too much work to do it and would cost him money. I quit 2 days later and went to work for his competition. There was this girl, who was very romantic, had a very good relationship with her. I would drive 40 minutes to come and see her, and yet somehow something was odd. There were days where she loved to talk with me, loving me a bunch, crying sometimes about how I'm the best people she knows, that she doesn't deserve me, etc. And I think it was really in love with me. But other days she disappeared, like no texting for 1, 2, even 3 or 4 days, crazy. But she had excuses and I was foolish enough not to ask further. But I noticed a weird pattern. She would only be super lovely with me after those breaks, and her interest will slow down until she disappear again. Fast forward a month. I'm about to leave office now, so I'll continue later if you want. And her best friend finally comes to me very embarrassed and confess me that she, my GF, has a boyfriend and he lives in the same city, and that he is a real jerk. The one that humiliates you or even hits you in front of his friends. And that my girlfriend blocked me on WhatsApp and logged off Facebook every time she was with him to avoid getting caught. And all the time she chatted me back or called in the middle of the night with the excuses, I had a fight with my parents, I'm anxious, I can't sleep, etc. To which I did my best to tranquilize her and ask if she wanted to see me tomorrow etc. Was actually every time he did something bad to her, like showing his friends videos of her sucking his dong, or maybe calling her a s in front of her classmates, I was stone cold. I didn't know how to feel, I didn't know what even say to her, if even talking back to her again. It was awful, but on the same time guilty to leave her because it would make her abusive relationship even worse. You need to stop seeing her and she needs to stop seeing him. If I were you, I wouldn't trust her anymore, and it's not worth being with someone you can't trust. My drama queen grandmother was basically disowned by everyone but my dad and I. It seemed like she really cared about me, and we were close, but something felt off. One day, her and my dad had a huge fight, and she's calling me, crying, saying if I don't have my son, I have no one. She said it in the next 3 conversations. When I tried confronting her about how she treated my dad, she said she needed a break from talking to me. It all hit me at once. She was using me as some kind of audience to fuel her self-esteem. It was always about her and her drama. She didn't love me. She loved the shock value and validation I gave her, and when I stopped, I had used up my value. I see we have the same grandmother. Nico, my cousin. Let's go bowling. I was befriended by a few people who pretty much used me due to my low self-esteem and eagerness to please to make them feel better. Also, since I was chubbier than most of my then so-called friends, I make them look prettier when we go out. I have a habit of spoiling friends by doing things for them, so when the time came that I needed to say no, they were not happy about it and dropped me in a dime. It took a while for me to notice the patterns. I'm glad you were able to say no to them and get past them. I hope you have friends now that will spoil you back, or, you know, are better friends to you. I overheard my GF at the time saying to her friend that she really wanted to be single after college once she had her own job and place to live. At the time I thought it was more of an offhand comment, like, I would enjoy it, but didn't think it was something she 100% wanted to do. Pretty much the day that she moved out of her parents' house and had a job, she said she wanted to go on a break. We talked about continuing the relationship for another 6 months. I remembered her having that conversation and brought it up. You know, when you ask a question and the other person is so surprised they just have no response and clam up. Yeah, that was her exact response. She had nothing to say. I then said, okay, I guess that answers my question. She didn't say anything to that either. Turns out she just wanted me more as a status symbol rather than someone she was actually interested in. Not saying she didn't have zero feelings for me, but I think a large part of them were similar to liking someone because they are rich feelings. At the time in college I was campus famous for a sport I played. Once I graduated I wasn't a hot item anymore that she could brag to her friends about. I was walking with my best friend in high school at the time and this other kid. I told them I had to go and turned around. I remembered that I didn't have that class on that day, so I turned around again and tried to catch up to them. I was just behind them when I heard the other friend ask my best friend, why do you like him? Why do you hang out with him? His response, cause he's rich. I'm not even rich, it's my parents that are rich. When I was asked to pay more than half the rent on my own despite 3 other people living in the house because they didn't make enough to pay the rent, then they proceed to go out to bars while I'm too broke to even afford food. When I was his personal therapist when he and his ex broke up, not for the first time, and a few weeks later they got back together and I never heard from him again. You're welcome, butthole. I have hot friends, guys calling me to invite me to come out with them, then casually at the last minute suggest I bring certain friends. Frick off, dudes. If you want me to hook you up with my hot friends, just say that in the first place. I want you to hook me up with your hot friends. Never. I'm the kind of jerk that doesn't even allow the setup for that sort of thing. Example. Person at work. Hi Jay. Any plans for the weekend? Me. I'm not covering your shift for you, Meg. I need to learn. Anytime my boss says, this really is something everyone should be doing, Since you're such a hard worker, I'd like you to do it. Translation. No one else wants to do this task. No one else needs or is required to do this task, but in theory they probably should. You are going to do it and no one, not even me, will remember that I asked you to do it because this task is so utterly unimportant. Life pro tip. Don't work so hard that you finish your tasks early and need to be assigned other things. Instead of being impressed, your bosses will start assigning you the menial tasks no one else has to do because they're busy. Yup, learned this after I picked up multiple useless mindless tasks after I optimized my workflow and automated part of it. Now I sit here and browse through Reddit while letting crap pile up so I have justification to be busy. Cause if they don't appreciate my work I rather not give a crap. Constant trips 40 mins, one way, a way to go hang out with the group of friends that had been such for over 4 years, often giving rides, buying booze weed, only to find out when I wanted them to visit me it wasn't convenient enough for them. Turns out, they all agreed that I was being a drama queen because I wanted mutual friendships and they didn't give two shoots to go out of their way when I had been doing just that for years. Later on, I would find out through mutual friends or FB pics they would all make plans and go out and not invite me because it was too much trouble and I lived too far away, etc. Frick people like that. Those aren't friends. I think I sort of knew before this, but having it spelled out so plainly made it impossible to ignore. We would date, then he would break up, then I'd be doing fine. Then he'd ask me to take him back and I always would because I was an idiot. So we did this dance a few times and finally I have had enough. I break up and start to realize I was his second choice always. He would just keep me so close that if things didn't work out with the girl he was actually wanting to be with he would still have someone who loved him. And I did love him. Not the way I love my husband of course, but I loved him like you do your first real crush. So a few months after I completely end things with him I'm finally in a good place where I don't feel like I need to be with him. He contacts me telling me how he loved me and he could see us getting married, blah blah blah. I tell him straight that he never really loved me and that he just wants someone who is devoted and stable. That person didn't need to be me though. It could have been anyone else really. I just happened to fit the bill for the past 2 or so years at that point. He agreed that I was right and we basically stopped talking after that. It was obvious my only purpose in his life was to make him feel loved. I don't regret the relationship. It taught me a lot about the kind of partner I wanted and it also taught me that I needed to find my self-worth. The person I'm dating isn't going to do that for me. Now I'm married to an amazing man whose first choice has always been me since we were 15. I just didn't know it until after high school. My mother used to send me to sleepaway camp for a month every summer against my will. I suffered from the usual bullying and homesickness. The very last summer sleepaway camp my mother sent me to was no different. But my mother used to send me care packages filled with junk food, cakes and candies to enjoy. I got more packages from home than any other camper in my cabin. One kid befriended me and I would share my bounty with him. One of the other kids in our cabin tried to warn me that my friend was only using me. Couldn't I see that? No, I couldn't see that and I ignored his warning. Days or weeks later, for reasons I cannot recall, almost every kid in the cabin ganged up on me. They were punching me, hitting me, as I was laying in my bunk. Someone put a pillow over my face and held it down. Then I felt some heavy weight on the pillow on my face. One of my fellow campers was sitting on it and was grinding his butt into the pillow as well. I made a move with my arms and hands to push the pillow off of my face. I had to push against the weight of the person sitting on it. I finally did, and the second the pillow came off my face, I was staring at the rear end, no, not naked, of my friend. He walked away from my bunk and went to his bunk and lay down, pretending he wasn't participating in my torture and was just watching. The rose-colored glasses were off. I finally saw this guy for the dong he was. Recently, out of curiosity, I looked this guy up on Facebook and Google. Today he is a comedy writer who also does stand-up. No, he is not a famous stand-up comic in the very least. None of you have heard of him. I've seen some of his videos doing his stand-up act. He sucks at it. It's not just me who thinks that. Even an old blog on stand-up comics named him one of the worst stand-up comics. Though he does have a handful of impressive writing credits for some rather famous TV shows. But judging by the guy's posts on Facebook, and on Twitter and YouTube, The guy is an even bigger dong and jerk than he was way back in summer camp. This reminded me of Full Metal Jacket. I had a former friend who was always texting me to hang out and stuff. He, like me, was single and just more or less trying to enjoy his life. Anyway, one morning he called me up, asked if I could take him to the air. I gladly obliged because, you know, he's like me and doesn't have anyone to turn to. Turns out he had a life-threatening infection. I decided to call in a vacation day from work to help him get a handle on things. I was basically blindly calling his family to let them know what was going on. His brother informs me he's getting on the next plane. I inform my friend. He panics and says his house is a mess, specifically identifying that condoms, wrappers, and several other prophylactics are on the guest bed and that he'd be embarrassed if his brother had to deal with it. So I agree to go clean it up, and of course, my OCD kicks in and I just flat out cleaned his house up. He recovered and graciously thanked me. About 8 months later we were on a fishing trip in Colorado. I had a bad fall on a river and dislocated my shoulder. I couldn't jet the shoulder back in on my own and had to go to the emergency room for assistance. The nearest one was 1.5 hours away. Got there, shoulder fixed, but in incredible pain from having it out of socket for so long. He coincidentally met his now husband just a few weeks prior and seized the opportunity of me injuring my shoulder to spend the rest of the trip with him. I got dumped off at home, unable to tie my shoes due to the injury. I asked for him to help me go grocery shopping since I couldn't drive. I'd even make dinner for him and his new BF. He refused, asked me to find someone else. I then asked if he could drive me to my local doctor office the following Monday, also refused. He basically got to spend a whole weekend with his new beau because I took a fall and hurt myself. I wasn't asking to be babysat, I just needed some help. I mean, I literally clean scrubbed his sex room, and I couldn't get him to drive me to the store. I told him to go frick himself and haven't spoken to him since. When the company's profits hit $100 million and stock price doubled, we all got $100 as our year-end bonus while they explained we wouldn't get cost of living raises that year or the next. I hooked up with a girl in the summer who I sort of had a thing for, but after I left the next morning and she stopped talking to me, I knew I was just her one-night stand. Worse things in life, but I actually liked her for a little while. I don't think we get used on purpose, all the time, necessarily. Often, some people are just more willing to do things than others. I'm not saying there's not people out there purposely using people, but a lot of the time, friendships and relationships are lopsided simply because people are different. I think we tend to count what others owe us more than what we owe them. It happens. I got out of the military last April. Started terminal in February. Noticed as soon as I wasn't going to work anymore. Within maybe 2 weeks. Didn't get any calls or texts anymore. That's okay though. People make plans and everyone is really tight at work, so plans are made at work, and when you aren't there anymore you kind of just fade away. I understood. But then the lease was up on our house, so we had to move out and find places to stay. My roommate found a place with a girl he knew, and so I was looking for a place. Posted on Facebook, texted a bunch of people for a couch to sleep on for a few weeks. Not much was available. A few weeks is pretty long, I realized, but people I had let live with me at my old apartment for a year or 6 months or any of those several people completely free, I heard nothing from. Same type of people who post the whole "let's take care of our homeless veterans before anything else" Facebook memes too. I always prided myself in being memorable and someone who would go above and beyond. But when you realize you aren't, or that people really don't care, man, that hits you like a ton of bricks. Sent me to a dark place I am just beginning to climb out of. Lost a lot of respect and trust for some people. BTW, not saying no one offered help. Some eventually did, and I told them how much that meant to me, and it meant a lot. It was just very stressful as I was very nearly on the street or sleeping in my car. When my best friend knew I was alone and sick over Christmas, but I still didn't hear from her for days. And even then it was only because OMG we broke up again. Some best friend. I registered my friend's car in my name because she couldn't due to an abandoned vehicle on her record. She promised to give me rides to and from work if I did this for her. She left me and my 2 kids ages 4 and 2 stranded at my work with no ride home after dropping us off that morning. I had given her my last $10 for gas money so she could pick us up. She had their car seats in her car. Luckily my 19-year-old son and his friends were in the area and came and gave us a ride home. I went and took my name off her registration the next day. Frick her. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.